Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight in and moving way beyond basic syntax to look at what's really happening under the hood with jQuery. You know, how it actually interacts with the DOM. If you've ever found yourself wondering why jQuery works the way it does, well, you're absolutely in the right place. We're going to break down the architecture of the jQuery wrapper pattern. Okay, so here's our roadmap. We'll kick things off with syntax parity, then look at the jQuery object architecture, dive into the really cool sweet wrapper pattern, and finally, we'll talk about unwrapping that DOM element. Right, Section 1, syntax parity. Let's start with something super familiar, how we actually grab elements on a web page. Look at these two approaches. On one side, we've got standard vanilla JavaScript using document.getElementById. And on the other, the exact same action, but in jQuery. You can immediately see the crazy verbosity of vanilla JavaScript next to that incredibly streamlined, compact jQuery statement. I mean, they achieve the exact same goal, but you really have to ask, what makes that shorthand possible? Well, that brings us to the famous $sign. The really crucial thing to remember here is that this is simply an alias. It's just a way of telling your code, hey, we're using jQuery here. You could literally type out the full word jQuery every time. They're completely interchangeable. But as developers, we love efficiency. So the $sign acts as this perfect little shorthand to save our keystrokes and just cut down on all that visual clutter. Moving on to Section 2, the jQuery object architecture. We know the syntax is way shorter, but what's actually happening when we run that statement in the browser console? So the architectural difference here is actually pretty stark. With vanilla JavaScript, your return output is a raw HTML object, which structurally acts as a native DOM element. But over on the jQuery side, that $sign selector doesn't just hand you back raw HTML. No, it returns a totally different structure called a jQuery object. If you look at it in the console, you'll notice it's enclosed in square brackets. And that's because its structure type is actually array-like, and it's zero-indexed. There's a great quote from a NetNinja tutorial that hits the nail on the head here. It says it's a jQuery object, and the jQuery object is based on the array type. It returns it looking like it's just an array. So think about it. Even if you're just asking jQuery to find one single heading, it takes that heading and puts it into a zero-indexed array-like structure. When you see those square brackets during debugging, it's not some weird quirk. It's an absolutely fundamental architectural design choice. And this array-like structure sets us up for a really powerful functional programming concept. Let's look at Section 3, the sweet wrapper pattern.
I want you to think of your raw native DOM element, say a basic H2 tag, as a piece of candy, this sweet, if you will. On its own, it's just a basic JavaScript object, right? But when you select it with jQuery, the library takes that sweet and entirely envelops it in a wrapper. That wrapper is the array-like jQuery object we were just talking about, and its entire purpose for existing is to grant that simple sweet inside some serious superpowers.
Once it's wrapped, your simple HTML element suddenly gets access to the whole extensive jQuery library, meaning you can chain methods right onto it. You get effortless styling using the .css method to quickly set properties. You get complex, smooth movements using the .animate method to slide things all over the page. Stuff that would honestly take several lines of really dense vanilla JavaScript suddenly becomes this powerful, single one-liner. But here is the core technical realization of this entire architecture. These superpowers, they do not belong to the HTML element. They belong exclusively to the wrapper itself. Seriously, the raw DOM element inside has absolutely no idea what .animate even is. It's the jQuery object enveloping it that holds all the tools. This is exactly why jQuery insists on returning its own object type instead of just raw HTML. Which perfectly sets up Section 4. Unwrapping the DOM element. Since all these magical methods belong to the wrapper, what happens when we actually need our raw element back? Because, sometimes you just don't need that heavy wrapper. Maybe you need to pass the native JavaScript object over to a completely different, non-jQuery library. Well, because the jQuery object is architecturally array-like, downcasting or unwrapping it is actually super straightforward. Step 1, you store your wrapped element in a variable. Step 2, you just use zero-indexed array notation, literally just adding a bracket 0 to the end of it. That notation reaches right through the wrapper and pulls out the vanilla HTML element. You get your raw sweet back. Okay, so we've extracted our element. Now I want you to think about this logically based on what we've just covered. If we try to call the .animate method on this newly unwrapped element, this native DOM element we just pulled out, what is actually going to happen? Well, if you guessed it would throw an error, you are completely right.
Because we've stripped that wrapper away, the element drops entirely back to just being vanilla JavaScript. It doesn't have access to the library anymore. The native DOM element simply doesn't possess a .animate method, so your code is just going to fail immediately. And this proves that the functionality lives entirely in the architecture of the wrapper, not in the DOM itself.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought. The wrapper pattern isn't just some neat jQuery trick. It's an absolutely foundational software engineering concept. Knowing how powerful it is to envelop a basic object to grant it superpowers, how might this architectural concept apply to other modern libraries or frameworks you're using today? It's something to look out for in your everyday coding. Thanks so much for joining me.